Hello, YouTube Pipers. Thought I'd use my sign once more. Some people don't seem to know where I got the name Double O Pipe from. This was it. And I've been known by that with the addendum aka Rick for quite some time now. I have my London Coronation by Simon pipe. And it is filled with velvet. I forgot to mention that the last time I was on here. That velvet's good stuff. Yep, that velvet's good stuff. Got my window open for a little bit of ventilation. Trying to suck that flame down into that tobacco. Doesn't seem to want to go. It wants to stay on top. Got me a cup of water and a smoke. Do like those Codger blends, and I do like my pipe. I've been thinking about when I first got my license, my pharmacy license. First place I tried to get a job was at the local hospital, St Francis. But they weren't hiring at that time, so I had to move to Florence, South Carolina to work at McLeod's Hospital. Used to be McLeod's Infirmary. Worked there from 75 until 79. And the wife wanted to move back to her hometown, Pensacola. So in 79, after the birth of my daughter, we packed up everything and left Florence for Pensacola. 1 week later, McLeod moved into a completely new building and became the Regional Medical Center. Humongous complex from what I understand. But I left just in time not to have to help move all the pharmacy stuff. I guess that was good, but I enjoyed working there. We had a nice little group of people. So we moved to Pensacola, and I was there for 4 years, and the marriage kind of fell apart, and I moved back to Charleston. And I went to St. Francis, filled out an application, and they hired me. The place I wanted to be from the very beginning. Well, every other hospital that I had worked in, the pharmacy was pretty much in the basement. This particular hospital, St. Francis, we were up on the 9th floor. and we had the most beautiful view of the Charleston Harbor that you could see in the back, which wasn't used much for work, but on occasion we did go back there to do some compounding and such. But anytime you got stressed out, you could go back to this area and just look out at the harbor out there and just relax. It was wonderful. We did that a lot. Excuse me. We it was, for me, it was like working with a family. The only time that I was in a group or a large family setting was at Christmas and Thanksgiving when we had our reunions. Excuse me, I think I got a little heartburn here. But anyway, I was an only child, so I really got to where I felt like I was with family with these people. One of the girls, I call them girls, but to me at the time, they were girls. I mean, I was in my late 30s and they were in their mid 20s maybe. Still girls to me. But one of them, every time she passed by, I'd lift a bit and just float looking at her. She reminded me of Elizabeth Taylor, and I was just enamored of this girl. And when I was watching her, I would be kind of floating because she just had that effect on me. I asked her to go out with me several times, but she wouldn't do it. She wouldn't go out with me. It could have been because I was in the middle of a divorce. I don't know, but I always wanted to date this girl. To me, she was something. And somebody said something one time, "It ain't gonna happen, Rick. You might as well give up." And I said, when I give up, I'm dead. But she was an interesting individual and very, very attractive. Like I say, reminded me of Elizabeth Taylor. Anyway, got to be good friends with one of the techs, and she had her own little quirk. When she would explain something, that explanation would become a novel. She would have to go into every intricate detail of whatever was surrounding the story. Even if it was something to do with work, she would have to go into minute detail. We got to the point where we started saying, "Can you please cut it short this time?" She had a hard time cutting it short. She always, and loved that about her, that she was that way, but goodness, sometimes it just slowed you down at work. One of the pharmacists he was the prankster, I guess you would say. Always trying to get one over on somebody. And he did many a time. He was the boss was the manager, and he was the, what do you call it, the sub manager, I don't know, the manager under the boss. And the boss was a southern lady, very prim and proper, very nice lady, wanted things done correctly. And one time she was in a meeting, and there was a cake in the break room. And this guy, the assistant manager, that's what it was, the assistant manager came over to me and said, "Rick, I need you to do me something. The boss called down and said she wanted a slice of that cake in there." So I said, "Okay, what do you want me to do?" This meeting was a very important meeting that she was in. Well, I went in there, sliced up the cake. I walked out there, had it in my hand. I said, "Well, what room is she in?" He said, "She's on the 10th floor in room such and such." And I was walking out the door, and I was at the elevator holding that cake ready to go up to the floor she was on. And he came out and said, "Get your butt back in here. I was just joking with you." I said, "But you said she wanted this cake." He said, "I know, but I just, get your butt back in here." He knew that if I had gone up with that cake, I'd have been in trouble, because she didn't ask for that cake. Well, that's just one of the times he got me. And there was one time that we almost got him. Somebody sneaked up behind him and put a "kick me" sign on his back. He always checked when he walked out of the room to see if there was anything on his back, because he knew we were always trying to get him. With this particular time, it was so easily put on his back that he had no feeling of anything, nobody touching him or anything like that. And he was walking down the hall with that kick me sign. This was after he had been put up the chain, in charge of about 3 departments. And it would have been very embarrassing for him to be up there, but we didn't care. We just wanted to get him. But somebody felt bad and ran out there and said, wait a minute," and ripped that sign off his back. And he looked at it and got that sly smile on his face, said, "You almost got me." And we said, "Almost, but except for this sucker here." Had another guy who worked there, and every time I hear that song, "Smooth Operator" by Sade, that's who I think of. He came over to me one time and said, "How would you like, you want to split a Coke?" I said, "Yeah, I could use half a Coke." And I went back to what I was doing, and he was just standing there. I said, "Aren't you going to get it?" He said, "Well, I was waiting for your half of the price." And I just broke out laughing at him. I said, "You want my half of a 50-cent drink?" I said, "Nobody does something like that." If you ask somebody if they want to share something, you are offering to buy the entire thing. But no, this guy was cheap. But anyway, I didn't give it to him. I said, "Forget it. I don't want any Coke." And we hired a new guy. I think it's going to start raining out there because the wind's picking up. Anyway, we hired a new guy. And he was being trained. And at this particular time, he was working on the area. There was a small IV room with an IV hood that was made for mixing hyperalimentation, which is a very concentrated solution that's put through a line that goes directly into I think it's the aorta. So I mean, it's stuck right directly into an artery, which is kind of scary to me. But anyway, it's the high concentration is why it has to be done that way instead of just in a vein. It would eat a vein apart. Anyway, these hyperalimentations had to be mixed in a completely sterile area. Man, that wind's picking up good. And you had to type up labels for them. We had a Selectric typewriter there that we would run the labels through and type them up. And you had to have 2 labels for each, one for the bottle and one for the paperwork. And each time you did one, you had to number it with a magic marker. So anyway, he had 20 bottles. First time he'd ever done this. 20 bottles that he had to do. And he was there typing away, marking them with the magic marker, typing away. So he finally got to the end. And this jokester I told you about earlier, who was the assistant manager, came by. And the guy looked up at him and said, "I've spent the last hour typing these up. I hope they're all right." And he ripped the last one off and handed him the stream of labels because they were all attached. And he said, "Will you please look at them and see that they're okay?" So he went through them. Got to the last one. He said, "These are perfect." He said, "Boy, am I glad you said that." And then he said, "But," and the guy shut up and he looked at him and said, "What do you mean, but?" He said, "Well, unfortunately, you used a green marker to put the numbers on here, and we can't have that." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, 2 official colors here at St. Francis. There's a blue marker and a red marker. You can use those 2, but nothing else." He said, "Well, can I just let it go this time?" He said, "No, afraid not. You're going to have to redo them all." He said, "I can't do that. I'm already an hour behind. If I have to redo them all, I'll be 2 hours behind." He said, "I'm sorry, but it's official that you have to have red or blue numbers." He said, "You can go ask the boss if you want to." This was the assistant manager telling him all this. He said, "Well, I just don't care. I'm just going to go ahead and do it." He said, "That's fine. That's up to you, but I wouldn't want to be in your shoes after you do that." He said, "Really? Is that bad? Is that serious?" He said, "Yeah. I remember the first time I did it, I did something similar to you, but she made me do them all over again because that just wasn't correct procedure." He said, "But I can't." He said, "Well, let me go take them into her." And the whole time, the techs and the pharmacists behind the wall were just snickering away because they were hearing what was going on here, and they knew this was a load of bull. But this guy was sweating because he didn't want to have to go through these labels again. But here was the assistant manager telling him he had to do it. So he said, "Oh, I don't care. I'm just going to go ahead and do it." And he started to the room, turned around, and he said, "You think I'll really get in trouble?" I said, "It's up to you. You can do what you want to, but I'm just explaining to you what the official rules around here are. If you don't want to follow the official rules, that's your button of whacking. Not mine, because I told you." Well, the poor guy, he gathered up his 40 labels and he said, well, instead of doing them over, I'm going to go in and ask her, please, could I use these? And everybody just broke up then. I mean, they were guffawing and laughing as loud as they could. And he said, what's going on? I said, I don't know. It must be something over there. He said, well, I'm going to see her. And as he was walking toward her office, she walked out because all this laughing, she couldn't understand what was going on. So she said, what's happening? And he walked over to her and handed her the labels, and he said, is it true that I have to redo all these labels because I've used a green magic marker to put the numbers on them? And she looked at him, and she looked at him. She looked at her assistant, and then she realized it was him because he had that look on his face, and she knew him. And she handed them back to him and said, these are perfectly fine. You go ahead and take care of those bottles. Go get them done. I know you're behind. And she said, you, office. He went like this. Oh, I submissively walked behind her. We had another girl. She was kind of one of these people, I guess, you would consider ritzy. I don't know, but being ritzy, she was a little crude as well. Because we had a window where the nurses would come up and we'd hand her medicine through the window. Now she would come up to the window when she was working at night, while the rest of us were working up front, doing our thing, whatever we had to do. And she'd say, I'm too lazy to go to the door, so I'm gonna jump through the window. And you guys, I'm not wearing any underwear, so don't peek. Why would somebody do something like that? Anyway, she jumped through the window. Nobody peeked because nobody cared. Oh, me. And we had another guy that when he talked, he'd mumble a little bit. So we were eating in the break room. This was late at night. And he had this casserole dish, and I said, well, what you eating there? And he mumbled, and I said, chicken assholes? Is that what you said? Oh, jeez. I could picture cutting these things out, breading them, and throwing them in the pan. I can't remember what he said, but that's exactly what it sounded like to me. Anyway, sorry, that's just one of those things I remember because, like I say, he mumbled a lot, and that's just what it sounded like to me. And I repeated it back to him. He looked at me like, are you crazy? That poor guy with the labels, he got a lot of stuff. He had no sense of humor and very little common sense. So I think it was because of that he was picked on quite a bit. You had to have a sense of humor to work with these people. There was another guy that worked there. He always worked at night because during the day he worked an 8-hour shift at the Medical University Pharmacy. And when he knocked off there, he'd come over and work an 8-hour shift at St. Francis. He did that for 20 years. 20 years. Nicest guy you could meet. Intelligent. Knew everybody in town, I think. Excuse me. Knew pharmacy backward and forward. And you always went to him for advice or information. He knew it. He retired. And sadly, within 2 years, he was He had passed away. What a loss he was. He was a fountain of information about the past of Charleston, information about people and places. What a great guy. I was trying to think if there was anybody else I can remember some funny thing. I told you about Larry and hypnotizing people and him getting in trouble for that. And about Francis was the assistant manager, and he moved up whenever the lady retired, who was the manager, and he took on two assistant managers. One was a girl who was pretty smart, and the other was Larry. And Larry had he was always being ridden by the other assistant, and he had his not retirement. Anyway, whenever he quit, he just had it already printed up and just handed it to her. He had had it for a month or 2 weeks or so. We were sorry to see him go. He was another live wire. He was a good guy. But St. Francis was like a family, and then they were bought by a corporation, and that family atmosphere was lost. And not long after that, the whole hospital moved out west of the Ashley, leaving on 9th floor and that beautiful scene that we had that we could go and just sit in front of. Those were some special times, good times. I'm sorry I couldn't have worked there when I originally got my license, because I think it would have been so much better, and I'd have been so much happier than what I was doing. But that's the way things were. Good Lord, I'm almost 30 minutes, and I know you guys are bored to death. So let me get my finger over this and look at you and say thank you for watching. If you stayed the whole time, thank you for staying the whole time. I appreciate it. I enjoy talking to the screen. I don't know. I hope you all enjoy watching the screen. Take care of yourselves. God bless you. Until the next time. Bye-bye.